Here's my theory that I had right after finishing God of War 2018. I've never heard anyone bring up this topic, but why did Kratos start wondering why the serpent dropped him and Atreus near Thamur's corpse? Why would a line be spoken by a character unless it had a meaning or use after? My theory is that the devs had this outline story, before development on God of War Ragnarok begun, about Kratos and Atreus wanting to stop Ragnarok, and one way to do it would be to stop Baldur from getting killed, therefore stopping Fimbulwinter from happening. So they start their journey and they are pretty much on their way to succeed by setting stuff in motion that'll keep Baldur alive. But then they realize that either by changing the past they mess up the future even more, or they'll have to let Ragnarok happen to defeat Odin. So they travel back in time and blow the horn, at the exact time Kratos took sick Atreus to Freya, and tell the serpent that if he gets attacked by Baldur, he should drop them off near Thamur. That way they ensure the events will play out exactly how they did in the first game with Baldur dying. Because remember, the way how the curse was broken is that Atreus stood up to Baldur because Kratos was tied down by Freya's branches. That only happens if they meet near Thamur because that's where Baldur fell after his fight with the serpent. This will set up a cool time paradox, like who came first, the chicken or the egg. Because Kratos only happened to be dropped there is because of his future self setting things into motion. But his future self wouldn't be able to do this if his past self didn't already kill Baldur in the present. In the context of Ragnarok, this theory doesn't hold much weight, which leads me to believe that they either changed the story a bit due to directors changing, or maybe they have a future ideas for implementing this in a future installment. But my question still remains the same. Why did Kratos ask why Jormungandr dropped him near the giant? I think what I like about this theory is that it answers two mysteries at the same time. The mystery of who blew the horn, and one that's not talked about nearly as much.
A dead giant. Why would the serpent leave us here?
Ty does this by supposing the existence of a cut God of War game that dealt with time travel, something that many fans, including myself, believe. But what I like about this theory is that it takes into consideration Kratos' change, and uses it as a reason for why he would want to time travel in the first place. In this theory, he's not time traveling to the past to get his revenge like he did in God of War 2. He wants to travel back in time to prevent Baldur from dying, because his death begins Fimbulwinter, which signifies the coming of Ragnarok. Now, I don't know if Ty knows this, but there is an interview somewhere where Corey's talking about the sequel to God of War 2018. And he points out that whenever Kratos used to set out with morally questionable intentions, something good would end up happening without him meaning to, like releasing hope to mankind. And the opposite would be true for God of War 2018's sequel, where Kratos would set out with good intentions, but unintentionally make things worse. Now, I've tried to look for where he said this, but I have no clue. The man has done a lot of interviews. So if someone knows what I'm referring to, please leave the title of the interview in the comments section below. But the point is that this is exactly what Ty thinks was going to happen in the sequel to God of War 2018. Kratos and Atreus would set out to stop Ragnarok by traveling back in time. But by doing so, something worse would happen. This would lead them to go back to square one. So that's when they would go to blow the horn to make sure Jormungandr drops their past selves in front of Thamur's corpse. I had a theory, but now that you asked, I connected it to the horn and I think it's a good one. So I believe that there's a chance that Faye is in the higher plane of existence. And since we still don't know how Faye died, and according to the theory you made, Faye is not in the light of Alfheim, that's not impossible. The evidence I have is that even after death, Faye can still interact with Kratos and Atreus with dreams. This is similar to the Fallen God comics where Kratos was seeing Athena in his dream every time he died. And we know from Kratos that he wasn't just dreaming about Faye. It was her trying to give a message to Kratos. I also noticed in the second dream with Faye, the one where she asked Kratos to keep Atreus safe, she disappeared similar to how Athena and Thor died. Corey once said that whoever blew the horn was tracking them, and Faye said to Atreus that she's always with them. So I think it makes sense that if Faye is in the higher plane of existence, she was the one who blew the horn to attract the Aesirs and give Kratos time to get Atreus to Freya. What can I say, you really can't watch a Kaptain Kuba video without the higher plane of existence being mentioned, even if it's by another member of the community. But I still think it's a pretty interesting take. The video he's referring to is one I made a while back that touches on the possibility that the dream sequences Kratos experiences are more than dreams. In fact, this is something that Kratos himself says at the beginning of the game.
I dream of the past, almost every night.
Ah, the bad old days in Greece?
No, it feels like Faye is trying to tell me something.
You don't mean to say you're talking to ghosts again, brother?
No, but it is something more than memory.
So according to Ultra's theory, the person who blew the horn was none other than Faye from the afterlife. We don't know for sure if she's in the higher plane of existence, but he does point out a very interesting similarity between Fallen God and God of War Ragnarok. In Fallen God, when Kratos passes out, he visits this higher realm where he can talk with Thoth and Athena. And in God of War Ragnarok, when Atreus passes out from Surtur's attack, something similar happens.
Don't be afraid. No matter what happens, I'll be with you. But your path is your own. Follow it, and you'll end up right where you're supposed to be.
So it would be very interesting if this whole time the one following Kratos and Atreus was none other than Faye herself. This would certainly make it possible for Faye to have been the one who blew the horn. Ultra doesn't explain much as to why she would need to do this, but it's not out of the realm of the possibility. After all, Faye is one of the few characters that can communicate with Jormungandr. We know that there's a notion of time and destiny in the God of War franchise. We do have time travel in God of War 2, but what about the concept of time and timelines in the Norse saga? Well, in God of War 2018, Mimir and other characters say that something in the prophecy changed. Kratos and Atreus killed Magni and Modi, but they were supposed to survive Ragnarok, and Fimbulwinter was not supposed to come this early. And for God of War Ragnarok, we know that the event of Loki's shrines doesn't share the same fate. But what if the one who blew the horn are Kratos and Atreus from the first timeline? Those who followed the prophecy and played the event like they were supposed to happen while they were fighting against Thor and Odin. The Old Father and Kratos die, and Atreus uses his giant knowledge on magic to tap Kratos' soul in the marbles to find him a new body or resurrect him someday. So I know this theory is not complete by any means, and it most likely isn't right, but I just found it somewhat unique because instead of solving the mystery with time travel, they go at it from a slightly different perspective. The first timeline. This is something that I had honestly forgotten about, but Mimir indeed alludes to the possibility of it existing.
Another prophecy.
No, brother. Prophecy doesn't expect this for 100 more winters at least. You've changed something. Prophecy didn't count on you.
I believe that this is also something that Santa Monica couldn't answer in Ragnarok due to the Norse saga having only 2 games. But this has left us with the other mystery of certain events happening much earlier than when they were prophesied. What exactly does this mean? According to this theory, the timelines seem to overlap in a sense, and that's why you can hear the horn in this other timeline. I wish he would have explained more of his theory. The last part I have a hard time understanding, but I think he's referring to the prophecy of the Jotunheim mural. According to the lore in God of War Ragnarok, Kratos was supposed to die at the hands of Thor, but because Kratos was able to change as a person, he was able to change his destiny. But in the original timeline, the Norns saw that Kratos would have died. So I think what this fan is saying is that in the original timeline, Kratos would have died at the hands of Thor. Atreus then would go and blow the horn to ask for a way to bring his father back. And then the story of the third game would be about this, bringing Kratos back. Which, interestingly enough, was a similar story planned for God of War Ragnarok.
There was the earliest draft of an outline that we had come up with that we took to Eric. We had Kratos. This is deep inside stuff, but like Ben, we have a relationship now after many years.
That's right.
But Kratos died in the Thor fight at the very beginning of the game.
Oh wow!
And so he was going to die, and then it wasn't a permanent death. What was going to happen? And I don't care. We can tell this because it doesn't happen anymore. So this is all fan fiction at this point now. He would get pulled out of hell essentially by Atreus, but it's now been like 20 years have passed.
Oh my god.
Again, I only think this is what he means. If they are watching the video, I would love it if they could explain the theory further. All I know is that I find the notion of 2 overlapping timelines really interesting. So maybe that's why Kratos was able to hear the horn. First, you have to consider that the script for the sequel changed a lot from what they had planned initially, talking about Kratos dying in his first fight with Thor and playing with the grown-up Atreus draft. Back to the question, I think it was the Raven Keeper. In the game you can find some old scrolls written by them, and one of the scrolls reads that they can communicate with Jorm. I think by that time they could have known how to talk to him. That was my theory. Well, that was before Ragnarok came out and the Raven Keeper was just a random revenant, lol. This theory was one of the most surprising ones I read because by now I'm used to fans proposing the idea of future Kratos and Atreus, Faye, Angrboda, and even Odin in disguise as possible characters who could have blown the horn. But I've never seen anyone suggest the Raven Keeper as a possible candidate for this mystery. And when you look into it, it's not that far-fetched. For one thing, he is absolutely correct. There is in fact a scroll in God of War 2018 by the Raven Keeper where she mentions how the World Serpent cannot be spoken to. This would imply that at least at one time in history, the Raven Keeper blew the horn. However, this attempt to communicate with the Serpent must have happened many years before the events of God of War 2018, because she also refers to how the Serpent's presence caused the temple to submerge. But it would be interesting if the Raven Keeper tried to communicate with it again after Kratos raised the temple. And who knows, after so many years of the temple being submerged, Odin could have come up with a way to communicate with it, and asked the Raven Keeper to go while Kratos and Atreus were busy. But like he says in his theory, we already know that this isn't the case. He is assuming that the Raven Keeper originally had a much bigger role than the one she was given in God of War Ragnarok. Something I also believe because in God of War 2018 she seems to be more like Odin's second hand, someone who takes care of his affairs while he rules in Asgard. Meanwhile in Ragnarok she's just responsible for making the ravens a spy for him. So I know we're layers deep into speculating, but what if the concept art of the hooded woman was the Raven Keeper all along? What if she was originally the one who blew the horn? This is something we'll probably never know, but it's an interesting possibility to think about. It was Loki. Now, bear with me. By all accounts, we are looking for someone who's on friendly terms with Jormungandr, can communicate with them, knows the exact time Kratos, Mimir and Atreus would be preoccupied, and lastly, would need something from Jormungandr himself. What if in a future game, an adult Atreus who goes by the name of Loki, in order to be recognized by the giants due to the prophecy, is searching in one of the different pantheons. There he encounters the giants, who are either captured or just hiding due to the gods of the pantheon, worrying about this group of beings that came into their lands and their powers of precognition. Then it is up to Atreus to free them. But at some point in the game, Atreus encounters a powerful god that cannot be killed by conventional means. I believe that through an ally, Atreus discovers that the god is weak to Bifrost crystals. But when the giants left the Norse lands, this pantheon destroyed all the crystals because of the threat of foreign magic that could be used against them. Throughout God of War 2018 and Ragnarok, it is stated that Atreus has a lot of potential and null capacities due to his mixed heritages. I believe that using his precognition abilities and giant magic, along with it being fueled by his Spartan rage due to a death of an ally, he accidentally bends space and time and travels to the exact moment in God of War 2018 when his younger self was sick. He uses this opportunity to call Jormungandr in order to ask him if it's possible to obtain the Bifrost crystal that is in Mimir's second eye. He obtains it, manages to use this power to go back to his time in the other pantheon, uses the eye with the magic and the capacity to defeat the god, and continues to use it for the rest of the game until he returns it late at a time before past Kratos, Mimir and Atreus go to retrieve it. Look, when I set out to make this video, I said to myself that I would not play favorites in choosing one theory above any other to put at the number 1 spot. But when I read this theory, I completely threw that rule out of the window. There were a lot of great theories left by the community regarding the mystery of who blew the horn, but I think this one takes the number 1 spot. Simply because it not only answers who blew the horn, but because it also gives a satisfying answer as to why that person blew the horn. The first part of the theory is one we've heard many times. It's Atreus from the future. But I love that the reason he needs to blow the horn is to obtain Mimir's eye to defeat a tyrannical god from another pantheon. Look, I don't know, sometimes it's hard for me to get super excited about an Atreus game, but if this moment were to happen in his game, it would be the equivalent of Kratos getting the Blades of Chaos in God of War 2018. I can already see it. Atreus accidentally bends space and time and wakes up in the past, only to see the ominous red sky from his homeland. That's when he realizes that there's a way to defeat the god that kept his people prisoner for hundreds of years. Mimir's eye. So he goes to the horn, blows it, and asks Jormungandr to open his mouth to retrieve Mimir's eye. All of this happening while he sees his past self being carried by his father. This moment would be absolutely crazy, and it has single-handedly gotten me more excited about the Atreus game. I'm not saying Santa Monica has to do it this way, but I wish it elicits a similar feeling. So, good job RoboCrush, your theory blew my mind, dude. Now as always, I want to give a big thanks to all of my Patreon and YouTube members for supporting the channel monthly. Like I always say, without your support guys, none of this could be possible, so from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I would also like to thank everyone who likes and shares my videos. It may not seem like much, but it really does help. And with that said, thanks for watching, and remember, go forth in the name of Olympus.